Joshua chapter 4 is where we are at, and the title of our study this morning is Trophies. Lots of us have trophies. Trophies are a reminder of some accomplishment from the past. When shortly after I got saved many years ago, when I was 20, I was in my bedroom and looking at, I still had old trophies, from when I had played Little League baseball. Yes, I played baseball for a certain, well, actually all the way up every year, actually, until I got to high school. Then I stopped everything. I played a little bit of soccer, played a little bit of football, but baseball was my sport. Catcher, shortstop, and then once in a while they would put me on the mound to pitch. And I had these trophies in my room, still in my bedroom, that were reminding me of the glory days, which by that point had long since passed, man. I mean, at that point, and not much has changed in all those years, but there was no way I could probably even make it around the bases anymore, at least without stopping to take a break and get some water and Gatorade at second base or something. But that's what trophies are. Trophies remind us of past accomplishments. I still have one trophy that I've got, and it's actually a plaque, not an official trophy. Doesn't have any baseball players or soccer players or any kind of athlete on the top. It's a plaque that I got from the San Bernardino City School District for being such a success. And they gave that to me when I was a church janitor. And so that was, I kept that because it's quite comical. And every once in a while I come across it. Actually, I cannot tell you where I've got it at. I know it might be in the garage, I think. Every once in a while I come across it and get a good laugh out of it. But that's what trophies are. They remind us of things in the past. And I was going to say that shortly after getting saved and kind of looking at those trophies in my room, I thought, why do I still have these things? And put them in a box, threw them all out in the trash can. Nobody has asked for them since. It's the strangest thing. Even my mom didn't care. But that's what trophies do. They remind us of the past. Well, it is important for you and I, as we are walking with the Lord, to have trophies. However, the trophies that we want to collect are not trophies of our accomplishments anymore, but they are trophies signifying past accomplishments that the things that the Lord has accomplished in and through my life. So we're going to be looking at those this morning. I've broken this chapter up into a couple of different sections. Let's see if we can get it up there. Maybe my clicker isn't working. There we are. Crossing the Jordan in verses 1 to 18. So the majority of our time will be spent in those verses 1 to 18, crossing the Jordan, and then finally in verses 19 to 24, camping in Gilgal. So that's how the chapter is split up, and we will jump right in here at crossing the Jordan, which is verses 1 to 18. Now, because we have some of the junior hires in here joining us today, because the majority of junior hires are up at camp, and we are glad to have you in here, glad that you are here, hope that you have a pleasant time and feel welcomed today. But let me just bring you up to speed real quickly. Joshua 4, what is that all about? Well, just so you know, we started at Joshua chapter 1, and we've just gone chapter 2, 3, and now we're in chapter 4. But it started long before that. We started way back in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. We just started at the beginning and went through. And so this is simply a continuation of a story, a journey that God has been leading his people on for many, many years now. And for a long time, Moses, everybody's heard of Moses. Moses was leading the people. God was leading Moses, and then Moses was leading the people. But Moses has gone home to be with the Lord at this point, and so now Joshua has taken over, and Joshua was his assistant for all of those years. And so Joshua is now leading. And so that's the reason why the book is called Joshua. It's not really a book about Joshua or to tell us of all of his exploits or all of his accomplishments. Really what it is it's a book that is detailing what God did through this new leader, Joshua, in the lives of his people, as Joshua is leading them toward the promised land. And we will actually see them today, this group of Jews, enter the promised land for the first time, and it is quite exciting. Last week we saw Joshua chapter 3 where the river was split open, and so we will see finally the crossing of that Jordan here and see what takes place in the process of all of this. Now, in verse 1, it says, "And it came to pass when all the people had completely crossed over the Jordan." That's the Jordan River. It's not Michael B. Jordan. It's not Michael Jordan. It's not Jordan's. It's the Jordan River. And what we saw in the previous chapter was God stop the river from flowing. You go, man, come on. What is that, like a miracle or something? That's exactly what it was. And God stopped the river from flowing so that his people could go across on dry ground. And this simply continues the story or that testimony. And so it says, "And it came to pass when all the people had completely crossed over the Jordan, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying." Now, let me point something out. Oftentimes in the Bible, especially these early books, we have some Jewish writing, some Jewish style writing. And what I mean by that is they will tell us what happened, the writer will tell us what happened, and then the writer will go back and tell us what happened again, but maybe fill in some more details. And he might even go back again and fill in some more details. And so sometimes you're like, hey, as we go through this chapter, might go, well, I thought they crossed the Jordan in verse 1. Like, how many times did they cross the Jordan? They only crossed the Jordan once, but the writer, the author, in recording these things, was going back and retelling. Okay, so we find out here that everybody had completely crossed over the Jordan, that the Lord, at that point, the Lord spoke to Joshua saying this. So some instructions coming. "Take for yourselves 12 men from the people, 1 man from every tribe, and command them, saying, take for yourselves 12 stones from here." That's from the river. "Out of the midst of the Jordan," there it is, makes it clear, "from the place where the priests' feet stood firm. You shall carry them over with you and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight." Now, there's a lot in this chapter, and there's a lot in these opening verses. Those of you that take notes can see here that I titled this section verses 1 to 3. These are subpoints under our main point, crossing the Jordan. Subpoints, and this one is called command, a command. Because we see here in verse 2 that the Lord is commanding Joshua to do something, choose 12 men from the people, 1 from every tribe. And then what Joshua is supposed to do, and we will see him do this, he is supposed to in turn command the 12 guys to grab some rocks. Some rocks. What is that all about? Well, that's the point of our study this morning, and we'll get to it as we go through these verses. But pay attention that everybody's following orders. Joshua is following the leadership of the Lord. The people, they understand that Joshua is following the leadership of the Lord, so they in turn follow Joshua. They go, hey, he's following the Lord, so whatever he's telling us, we need to do that. And so that's how this is working out. Now, at this point, it's just Joshua getting the commands from the Lord. We'll see him go and command the people. But notice this also in verse 3. "Take for yourselves 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan." So as they were going through the Jordan, they were to pick up 12 stones. Now, from verse 1, it seems like everybody got through. And then God said, hey, okay, I want you to pick 12 guys, 1 from every tribe. There were 12 tribes. I want you to pick 1 from every tribe and send them back into the riverbed where the priests are standing. And I'll explain that in just a moment in case you're like, why were there priests standing in the middle of a river? We'll get to that. But the guys were supposed to go back to wherever the priests were, and they were to pick up stones and carry the stones away. Now, the instructions are clear. This is good leadership here from the Lord. He's telling Joshua clearly what he's supposed to do. And then Joshua is going to clearly tell the 12 guys what they are supposed to do. But notice this in verse 3, take for yourselves 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan. So they know where they're supposed to get the rocks from, the midst of the Jordan. You see, he had to say the midst. That means the middle of the Jordan. Okay? I know that none of you would ever do this at home. So I will explain for you, okay? Using my own kids as an example, because again, I know that all of you are good Christian boys and girls and would never do something like this. But sometimes when you give someone instructions, you give them some directions and you go, hey, go do this. Especially, and again, I'll use my own kids, but sometimes I would give them instructions and they would go and do it knowing what I meant, but they would only go halfway. Or I would say, hey, you need to pick your things up from the front room, go put them away in your room. Now, in a dad's mind, that means pick those things up, take them to your room, and put them where they belong. However, and again, I know you don't understand this. This is why I'm explaining. But in a young person's mind, pick those things up and put them away in the room means let me go pick these things up and then go to my door and go throw them on the bed or throw them on the floor. That's what that means. And so they understand, they know what the parent means. But in their laziness, again, which I know none of you are lazy, so you would never do this. But in their laziness, they go and they do the job halfway. But notice what God says. He says they need to go to the middle of the Jordan River because he knows how guys are. Guys are going to, they want us to get 12 stones from the river. Okay, well, there's stones right here. Why would we go all the way into the river? Like these stones are just as good as those stones. Let's get these stones. He says, no, you got to go to the midst of the river. It's clear communication. This is good leadership. We talked about that last week in those leadership lessons, clear leadership. This is good. And then notice this. He gets even more specific. In verse 3, from the place where the priest's feet stood firm. So go to the middle of the river. When you get there, find the priests who actually are still standing there and go get the stones from right where they're standing. And then he says, you shall carry them over with you and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight. So go and grab these stones. One stone for each person. Now, it never tells us how big or how small these stones are. The truth is they could have been stones that you just hold in your hand. Everybody assumes that they were large stones that they put on their shoulder and had to carry with them, but it never really says how big or how small they are, but we assume that they were of a larger size. But I want you to note the command there, and the command involves grabbing stones. What about these stones? Well, we'll get to that in a little while as we continue on. In verses 4 through 7, we see the calling of these 12 individuals. Then Joshua called the 12 men. Notice what Joshua is doing. He is being obedient to the command of the Lord. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the children of Israel, one man from every tribe. And Joshua said to them, cross over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan. So go back over there where the ark is at. Now let's talk about that for just a moment, because some of you might go, the ark, like Noah's ark, was that in the middle of the river? What ark are we talking about here? It was the Ark of the Covenant. Now, I'll give you just the short version. This was a special box that God had instructed Moses to make. It was big enough that several priests needed to use poles put through golden rings on the sides of this box, pick it up, and carry it. Couldn't be just carried by one person. It wasn't just a small box. It was a large box. It needed to fit a staff in there, like a walking staff, and the 10 Commandments and some manna. And so this was a special box. Now, this special box had been, again, God had instructed Moses to build this box, and it had a couple of different uses. It was going to store things, but also on the top of this box was a golden lid. And God had chosen that spot, that golden lid, in between these two golden angels that were sitting on top of it, God had said, I'm going to be there. That's where I'm going to meet you. On top of that box, on top of that golden lid, in between those two angels. Now, doesn't mean that God, squeezed himself in there and that's where he slept at night. It just was a place that the people could use to know that, hey, this is where God is meeting, this is where his presence is going to be. And it doesn't mean that his presence was, like he was trapped in between those two angels. He was just giving the people this top, this mercy seat, it became known as a meeting place for the Lord. So as the box, wherever the box is going, if you see a box out there and you go, oh, that's the box that God, said to make, and on top of it, that's where he meets us. So then whenever you see the box, you go, oh man, there goes God. And wherever the box goes, you follow it, because I want to be wherever God's at. So that's what that was. That's the short version. Now, it says in verse 4, or rather verse 5, cross over before the ark. In other words, go back to the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan. There it is again. Joshua being faithful to give the same instructions. Go to the middle of the Jordan, and each one of you take up a stone on his shoulder. Now, again, it never tells us what size the stones are. But it would be quite comical if somebody went back and grabbed a little stone that you could hold in your hand and then, oh, let me put this on my shoulder, oh, and, walk around with it as if it were something heavy. So we assume that it was of a larger style or variety, that they would have picked up a good-sized stone. And, by the way, we all know guys, right? There's a lot of us guys in here. You young ladies, you know how guys are. If you send 12 guys, hey, do me a favor, go pick up 12 stones. If I were to take 12 guys out of here and say, hey, I need you to go out to the field next door, go pick up 12 stones and bring them back, what are they going to do? There's always going to be somebody who's going to come back with one little stone. Oh, here you go, Pastor Chris. Oh, the class clown, generally speaking. But for the most part, everybody's going to go over and be like, what's the biggest stone that I can get? Because that's how we guys are. Like, oh, and I might let you go first. And I go, oh, that's a cute rock, but look at mine. And then I'd pick up something bigger, and in the process strain my back. But at least I would get it here and I would look tough. Not that these guys did that, but, you assume that they went and they picked up good-sized stones. Something that needed to be carried on their shoulder. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but carrying a stone on your shoulder is nothing fun. We were at the beach yesterday, and I was carrying an easy up for someone. And even an easy up, you put that on your shoulder, you walk through the sand for just a few yards. I didn't even go that far, but it was like, man, this thing hurts. I cannot imagine picking up a stone, you put it on your shoulder, and you walk many, many miles to Gilgal, as we'll see later on. But he's giving them instructions here. And then he goes on to tell us this in verse 5. Each one of you take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, meaning 12 stones. Just everybody all 12 guys pick up one stone each. Verse 6. Now here's what the stones were. That this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, saying, what do these stones mean to you? Now there is where the title trophies came from, because that's what these become. These stones become a trophy of something that God did in the past. And he's saying, pick up a stone, carry it with you. We're going to take these with us. That way, in the future, we're going to pile all these things up. And when the kids get a little bit older and they come and they go, hey, Dad, what's up with these stones right here? Ah, son, daughter, let me tell you, these stones right here, they're from the middle of the Jordan River over there. The middle of the Jordan River. Did somebody go in and swim and pick that stone up and bring it out with them? No, they didn't need to, because the Lord split the river open. Nah, come on. No, seriously. Go ask your Theo. He'll tell you. And they go over and ask their Theo, and they go, no, those rocks, man, check it out. Those rocks, they came from, nah, come on. No, seriously, go ask your abuela, go ask your grandma. Okay, I'll go ask you. Grandma, no, and everybody's got the same story. Everybody says those came out of the middle of the river. This is crazy. And so they would have those as a trophy, and they would go, nah, this is what God did in the past. This is what he accomplished. Not in us, not through us, but for us, on our behalf. This is how he led us. In fact, we actually used to live on the other side of that river over there. We used to live on that other side of the river, but now we're on this side of the river. And God got us across. And so that's what he's instructing them here. In verse 7, then you shall answer them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. In other words, he opened up the river as the ark of the covenant was going through. When it crossed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. And these stones shall be for a memorial to the children of Israel forever. And then in verses 8 and 9, we see the actual carrying there. It says in verse 8, and the children of Israel did so, just as Joshua commanded. Note what's going on here. The chain of command. God tells Joshua. Joshua tells the guys. So there's obedience there. God tells Joshua. Joshua's obedient to do what God told him to do. He in turn tells the guys, who in turn are obedient. And they do what Joshua told them to do. Obedience. And I want you ladies to understand, there are no ladies mentioned yet. There were ladies all over the place there, but there are no ladies mentioned yet. Why do I say that? To pick on you and go, oh, you ladies, you do the easy stuff, go make the tortillas or whatever. Is that what I mean? No, what I mean is this. A lot of times as we get into the New Testament, ladies will get angry and, why? In fact, we're coming up on it pretty quick here in Ephesians chapter 5 and 6. But, sure, the women have to be obedient to their husbands. Oh, sure, they have to follow the lead of the men. Well, here, we don't see any ladies at all. It's men obeying men. But there's a chain of command. When Jesus steps on the scene many years after this, he's obedient to the Father. So even Jesus was obedient. And then the disciples were obedient to him most of the time. Sometimes. Eventually they were. But there's a chain of command. It's just biblical. It's not meant to keep any one person down or any, one gender like, oh, no, we're going to restrict you. You can't do such and such. No, it's just order. There's a chain of command. There's order. That's all it is. And there's an order to everything that we do, but that's a different study for a different time. So verse 8, the children of Israel did so. Okay? And just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones from the midst of the Jordan, as the Lord had commanded, or as the Lord had spoken to Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried, there we are, carrying, for those of you that take notes, carried them over with them to the place where they lodged and laid them down there. Then Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests who bore the Ark of the Covenant stood, and they are there to this day. Now note, we do not get any instructions, at least verbal instructions, that were given to Joshua that the Lord was telling him, set up 12 stones in the midst of the river. We do not know if God did that, if he gave those instructions or not, or if Joshua just decided from his own heart to also make a monument right in the center of the river. And so he goes, and Joshua piles up 12 stones. He doesn't ask anybody else to help him. He just goes and he does it himself. It seems to be something personal between him and the Lord. Now we go, why would he pile up stones in the midst of the Jordan? Who's going to see them? How big was this Jordan? How deep was it? How wide was it? Is anybody ever going to see those stones? Now, I do not know exactly why, but it may be that Joshua put them there so that if the river ever, the level ever lowered, so they would go, hey, there's stones sticking out of the water. And then Joshua or the other people could go, yeah, I know. Joshua put those there. What do you mean he put those there? When did he do that? He did that when we crossed the Jordan River. When you cross the Jordan, on boats? No. God split the river open. So you see, these are trophies that are being set up. Things that signify accomplishments in the past Not Joshua and the children of Israel, but God's accomplishments, his past accomplishments. You and I need those same things. And it can take many different forms, but one of the most common and probably the best is to keep yourself a journal of things that God has done. So that in the future, years down the road, you can open up that thing. Sometimes I know it's hard to believe, but sometimes there are times of disappointment in our lives, low times. And to be able to open up that journal and go, oh, wait a minute. Here it was 4 years ago. I was at a very low time. And then look what God did here, and you have some account of something that God did. You may look back to 2020. Remember 2020? Everybody remembers 2020. We wish we could forget it. We can't. But this is going to trip you out. Years from now, you are going to have your own kids. You're going to be a parent. Guys, you're going to have a dad bod, the whole thing. You're going to drive a minivan. And you're going to say something to your spouse, ladies or guys. You're going to say something about, oh man, COVID, man. Remember the mask? And then your kids are going to go, what is COVID? And you're going to be like, what? What did you just say to me? You'd be like, COVID, you know. And they're going to be like, what is COVID? And you'd be like, nah. You'd be like, this changed my entire life. What are you talking about? And you are going to have to go, oh, man, you're going to go back through your pictures, man. You're going to go back through your Amazon photos, you know, your iCloud. No, hold on, let me see. You're just, you know, because, you know, all the amount of pictures that we take, you just keep on going, man. And 1 hour later, you know, you're going to come back and be like, oh, no, here's the pictures. Look, this is me. They're going to be like, that's not you. They're not going to know because you're going to be wearing a mask. And so they're going to be like, I don't even, like, who is that? And you're going to be like, no, look, check it out. This is me leaving Walmart with 2 baskets full of toilet paper. No, it was crazy, man. Crazy. And so to have some keepsake from the past to say, hey, look, now this is what God did, man. We lived through this. God got us through. This is what he did. Or maybe at a camp, or maybe at a conference, or maybe just in a regular Bible study, or at an event or something, and you keep trying. You go, no, this is what God did. This is how God spoke to my heart. This is what he did for me. This is how he answered my prayer. And then you can look back, but you can also use it later on for your own kids to say, no, look, the faithfulness of God. Look at this. Look what he did. And so those trophies, not of things that we have done, but of accomplishments, God's accomplishments. That's what these stones become. I love that Joshua here takes time to set up this monument. I mean, Joshua, look, if you've not been around for this series, this study, it's been going on for a few years now, but it is estimated that there were multiple millions of people out there. This wasn't like 20 people. It is believed that there were millions of people out there, maybe hundreds of thousands, but still. Joshua had a lot to do. He had a lot on his mind. And yet, he takes the time to stop and honor the Lord. And it's a beautiful picture. Matthew Henry. Who in the world is Matthew Henry? The man with 2 first names. He was a Bible commentator from a long time ago. He's been home with the Lord for a long time. But he said this, note how, and this is, the language is old. Note how much soever we have to do of business for ourselves and our families. We must not neglect nor omit what we have to do for the glory of God and the serving of his honor, for that is our best business. God first, all the time. Now, if I've got a family, I've got to minister to them too, and I've got to make sure, Joshua had to make sure his family got across and make sure they were safe, and I'll be back. And then he goes back and takes time to honor the Lord. It says in verses 10, so the priests who bore the ark or held the ark stood in the middle of the Jordan until everything was finished. that the Lord had commanded Joshua to speak to the people, according to all that Moses had commanded them, or had commanded Joshua. And the people hurried and crossed over. Let me point something out, because we just read through it quickly. Obedience. Did you see the priests? The priests, this whole time, while millions of people just happen to be crossing by, crossing through the river, are standing in the middle of the river holding the ark. They didn't set it down. They're holding it. And they're not budging. They're not moving. It's a wonderful lesson. I'll point it out again at the end of the study, but I'm so excited right now that I'm going to share it with you. I'm not supposed to be doing this. But whatever God has called you to do, just do that. And don't do anything else until you've done that. And don't leave. Just stay there and glorify God. I want you to think about this. There's a wonderful picture here. These priests are at the bottom of the river. I don't know how deep this spot is here with it, and at that time and all of that, but I know that they're at the bottom of the river. And they know that there's water back up the river at a city called Adam. They know that the water stopped. And they have to trust God that He is going to hold the water back while they're standing out there. So they, by faith, are not moving. You understand? We talk a lot in here about, hey, by faith, you gotta step out in faith, man. You gotta take a step of faith. And we hear that all the time. I say it, we hear it all the time. But sometimes you gotta stand still in faith. Just stay there. Don't try to weasel your way out of it. Well, man, I'm tired. My shoulder's getting tired. Or, man, there's water up there. Or, there's all these people coming by and kicking up all this dust. Or it's muddy. Or it's whatever. No complaining. They just stood there. And they did their job to the best of their ability. Whatever God has called you to do, just do that. And don't do anything else until you've done that. And when the difficult times come and you feel the weight of it on your shoulders and you feel like, man, I've never been lower in my life, what we want to do, our first response is, let me get out of this. God, get me out of here. Well, my response, like the priests, should be, I'm staying here, man. This is the lowest I've ever been in my life. The burden is heavy. But I know that God knows what He's doing. And instead of trying to weasel my way out of it or praying that God would get me out of here, you know what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to say, Lord, I just want to glorify You. So give me the strength to stay here as long as I need to. And that's what the priests did. What a wonderful, wonderful lesson. And so it says in verse 11, then it came to pass, when all the people had completely crossed over, that the ark of the Lord and the priest crossed over in the presence of the people. And the men of Reuben, the men of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over armed before the children of Israel as Moses had spoken to them. These were tribes that were staying on the other side of the river, but there was an agreement made and they were coming with them to go and do some fighting. Verse 13, about 40,000 prepared for war, crossed over before the Lord for battle to the plains of Jericho. So there's 40,000 there, just fighting men. On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel. God said He was going to do that. Here He's done it. And they feared Him. Who feared Him? The children of Israel. And what it means when it says that they feared Him, it means that they had respect for Him. They go, hey, God's with them. Just like God was with Moses, God's with this guy too. And so it says, and they feared Him as they had feared Moses all the days of his life. Verse 15, then the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, command the priests who bear the ark of the testimony, that's the ark of the covenant or the ark of the Lord, it's all synonymous, to come up from the Jordan. Joshua therefore commanded the priests, saying, come up from the Jordan. And then finally in verse 18, we see the closing of the Jordan. And it came to pass when the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord had come up, or had come from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet touched the dry land, that the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. Wow. You know, we sometimes escape things by the skin of our teeth, or maybe the nick of our ear. But still, God gets us through it. And here are the priests holding steady, holding steady. We're waiting on Joshua. Joshua's over there, man. We can see him. He's on the other side of the Jordan. We're following his command. And he's like, okay, let's go, guys. And they come up. And as soon as the last priest step on dry ground, boom, here comes the water. Closes right up. We don't like that, right? We don't like that. We want safety and security, Lord, it's okay if everything goes bad. I just pray that it would all go bad 3 weeks after I leave. We want to be free and clear, man. And oftentimes the life of faith involves those close calls, those close moments like, okay, I'm just getting through by the skin of my teeth. Yes, but you got through, didn't you? God was faithful and did what he said he was going to do. That's what he did here. God did what he said he was going to do. We move on to the second and final main division, which is the camping in Gilgal. We'll see them travel to this place called Gilgal. Let's look at it, verse 19. Now the people came up from the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. In verse 20, and those 12 stones, that's right, they had 12 stones, which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal. Then he spoke to the children. Now, it doesn't say how they set them up. I imagine they piled them, but I don't know what they did with them. Somehow set them up. So here's Joshua being obedient. The men are being obedient. Everybody's walking in obedience. This is good. Then he spoke to the children in verse 21, the children of Israel, saying this, when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what are these stones? Then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel crossed over this Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed over, that all the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. Did you see that at the very end of verse 24? That all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God. When I used to get baseball trophies, really back then, it's a participation trophy. Everybody got a trophy, But I got trophies. And those trophies reminded me, oh, that's right, back on that team and that year, I played catcher. So it was a reminder of just how, sure my hands were, because as a catcher, baseball player, you get, both hands. You got to be able to catch and you got to be able to throw accurately, right? And so as a catcher, that's right. Yeah, I remember that year. And, then maybe I got picked up for All-Stars, and I got picked up because, I was good at doing this thing. Well, in this case, these stones were to signify just how good God was. Verse 24, that all the peoples of the earth, not just the Israelites, everybody, because everybody's invited into God's family. Everybody's welcome. But God wants to be glorified throughout the entire earth, and so he says that all the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever, just by looking at these stones. Now I want to point something out before we finish. Verse 21, then he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what are these stones? Now I do not want to make too much of it, and I don't want to be dogmatic and say, well, only this person can do it, but I want you to understand something here, guys and girls. Joshua here put it upon the fathers to teach the spiritual lessons. Does that mean that the moms could not do it? No. In fact, we know there are many families represented here. Many of you would say, and I don't want you to raise your hands or say anything, but for many of you, mom is the spiritual leader in the family. I want you to understand that Joshua put it upon the fathers. And he said, when your children ask their fathers. So the fathers were not to say, go ask your mom, I don't know. Go ask your youth pastor. It was their responsibility to speak to their children, to take the time to speak to the children and explain what God had done. I'm sharing that with you because I know, as well as you, that there is a breakdown in the family, at least here in America, but in many parts of the world. There's a breakdown in the family. And I'm talking about Christian families, where in many Christian families, mom is the spiritual leader. Guys, the main part of that responsibility falls on you. When you have kids, it's your responsibility to lead in a godly, loving, wise way. It's not to just be left to your wife. Well, she can do it. I know she's busy making dinner, but whatever. Go ask her. I don't have time. I'm watching the game. I don't know right now. I'm trying to fix the car. It was put upon, the responsibility was given to the fathers, that they were to take the time to teach their kids. And moms can do a great, fantastic job of it, oftentimes much better than the dads can. But the dads have the responsibility, the main responsibility. And why do I tell you ladies? Why did I say, hey, you guys and girls? Why? Because you ladies, when you are starting to, say, oh, here's this guy, and he's really cute, and he smells like, the Hollister store, and look, he's got all the right clothes and whatever else, but is he a godly leader? Is he a godly leader? Is he a godly leader? And does he help you understand things in the Bible? That's what you want to be looking for. Here's what I told my kids a long time ago. I told my son this. I said, look, when you are starting to look at these young ladies, you need to ask yourself, is this young lady somebody that I want to be the mother of my children years from now? We don't think that way. We just look and go, oh, man, he's so cute. She's so fine. And man, they smell so good. And look at their hair. And, yeah, so what? They got ashy elbows. But you know what? They just, they're so cute. And they dance well. Or, they got a cool car. Or look at how he throws the baseball. Or whatever. All the different things. When you're young, you just... you just, oftentimes I used to be young. You could just be in la la land. You just go, oh man, he's so cute, she's so cute. But ask yourself, but they're so cute, but what about 5 years from now? What about 10 years from now? Is this individual going to be a good parent to my kids? You go, you don't even have kids. No, but you will. You will. You will. It'll be payback for all the things you did to your parents. But you'll have kids. You'll have your own kids. And ladies, you want to be looking for that guy. It's like, is he a good leader? Is he a godly leader? I'm not talking about a leader like, does he pound the table and get angry at the waiter because, he looked at me? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, is he a good, loving, gentle leader? And does he have some wisdom? And is he able to teach? And is he able to help you understand things? The responsibility here fell mainly to the fathers. Again, the ladies, the moms certainly would be involved. But in Joshua's mind and in his heart, he said, hey, the father's got to lead the way. It's a big responsibility. It's hard. It's difficult. There are few things that I've done that have been harder than being a dad. The only thing harder than that is being a husband. And the only thing harder than that is following the Lord. Only because, not because God makes it hard, but just, it's just hard to, keep my eyes on the Lord, and I'm trying to follow him and be faithful. These are tough things. These are hard things. But I go on to ask this question, why the stones? I mean, it's the same question, in verse 21, what are these stones? Again, Matthew Henry, we read what he said. Had Joshua done it without divine direction, it might have looked like a design to perpetuate his own name and honor. Nor would it have commanded so sacred and venerable a regard from posterity as now, when God himself appointed it. I just realized that some of my things didn't transfer over, but that's okay. because I've got them for you. Now, why stones? You know, we think, well, doesn't God deserve, like, man, maybe they should have just built like a beautiful temple right there on the shore of the Jordan, you know, or at least maybe some big, you know, beautiful arch, you know, so that everybody come in there, they go, oh, right there, there's, you know, look at that beautiful arch. Well, what might have happened is that might have been a monument to, oh, look how great Joshua was. Because that's exactly what you would think a person, a man would do, is like, let me build this big, beautiful temple or this big, beautiful monument. But just stones? Why just stones? Because stones, simple. And they would just go, it's just a pile of rocks. No, I know, but that signifies what God did. Anything bigger, anything grander, anything made by hand, chiseled out, sawed, sanded down, might have been a monument to Joshua, to his great leadership. And so it's just simple stones. It's also a wonderful reminder that God is not looking for the spectacular. He'll do the spectacular. He's not looking for perfection. He knows we're not perfect. He's perfect. Just simple stones. That's all. That's it. Just simple people. That's it. He's not looking for stardom. He's just looking for simple people that he can use as trophies. So that people can even look at your life and go, oh man, no. I knew that guy in 6th grade. No, I'm telling you, he's saved. He's changed. Nah, I knew her. I knew her, man. I knew her when she was in 9th grade. I'm telling you, she's changed. She's saved. And they can look back and they can glorify God for that. Let me point out a few things as we close. Oh, man, I didn't even put anything up here. Sorry, trophies, verses 20 to 24. I get all excited and just go on like a Baptist. Verses 20 to 24, trophies. That's what these stones were. They were trophies. Simply put, trophies. Now, last week we had some leadership lessons, and I've got, where did it go? I didn't put them up here. What happened to my slides? I'm so disappointed. Let me share them with you. I swear I had those in there. That is the weirdest thing. You know what? Give me one sec. Ah! Sierra. Were those at the end of my slides? I'm so sorry. I put them out of order. Leadership lessons, number 1. God will oftentimes lead you through your leaders. What did the priests do? The priests didn't hear from God. The priests heard from Joshua. Now, I know that many of us, we go, man, I really want the Lord to lead me and tell me, you know, what am I called to do for the rest of my life? Well, I don't know. I don't know what he's called you to do for the rest of your life specifically. There are some general things. But I know that oftentimes God is going to lead you through your leaders. So if you have a godly leader that is giving you some instructions, that's how God is leading you during that time. And there will come a time later on when God may, and I'm sure he will, speak to you and call you and put something on your heart. But in the meantime, he's talking to you through your leaders. Here's why. If you cannot follow their simple instructions, how are you ever going to follow the Lord? So you've got to just learn obedience and just say, oh, okay, this is a godly leader, and I need to follow what he or she is telling me to do. That's how God is going to lead us. Okay? What's the next one, Sierra? Or maybe this is working. Let me see. There it is. Thank you very much. Verse 10. Or this is from verse 10. Do what God calls you to do and don't do anything else until you have done that. You remember I pointed that out. I got all excited and pointed that out. Do what the Lord calls you to do, and do not do anything else until you have done that. You go, man, I don't know what the Lord wants me to do. Well, do what you find in the Bible, whatever it says there, do that. But once God puts something on your heart, you need to do that. And then don't do anything else until you have done that. If you can't go step number 1, you're never going to get to step number 2. So just start with step number 1. Thirdly, from verse 14, this is where God exalted Joshua. in the sight of all the people. Let God exalt you in his way and his time. Don't exalt yourself. I know we have monuments to ourselves, right? I've got social media, a little bit of social media, my Instagram account. It's a monument to all of the greatness of Chris Amaro. Look at all the wonderful things he's done. The world is telling us, you got to promote yourself, man. You got to get yourself out there. You got to exalt yourself. God says, no. God will humble the proud and exalt the humble. Let God exalt you in his way and his time. It's going to be way, way better. Okay? And in verse 14 is where we saw God saying, hey, Joshua, I told you, I'm gonna exalt you. I'm gonna glorify you in the eyes of these people. I believe that there is one more up there. Do we have one more? Verses 16 and 17, we talked about this with the priests also. Do not move from where you're at until God tells you to move. Wherever God calls you to go, you go there, and then you just stay there until God tells you to move. I have no plans to go anywhere else. This is it. This shoebox, this stage, this music stand, you all, you'll come in, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, you'll be gone. That's okay. I have no plans to go anywhere. I'll still be here. This is where God has called me. And because this is where God has called me, I'm just going to stay here in the center of the river until God tells me to move. And until he does that, don't move. Wherever God calls you, you just stay there. Don't move. Finish the job. Do it to the best of your ability and do it well. I've obviously